Make today a look for it after my meeting day. Make today a getting to know your neighbors day. Make today a taking the back roads day. Make today a speaking a universal language day. Make today a finding your forever home day. No matter the day, PNC has the financial tools and technology to help. PNC Bank. Make today the day.
All right, if I could get everyone's attention, it's obviously wonderful to be in a ballroom with the chatter of conversations across the tables. So certainly, it's wonderful to see all of you today. Margaret, a reference, I'm Scott Swanson, the president of PNC Bank here in Illinois, and really on behalf of the club, it is so wonderful to have all of you here. Those of you who are members or appreciating programs like today's with the Exec Club, and I think today we've got a particularly timely program which we're bringing to you. You know, after the last couple of years, obviously, of the challenges and the realities of the global health crisis, there's a lot of excitement and energy around the return to travel, both for business and for leisure. And so I look forward to today's conversation, as I'm certain our speakers will shed light on the future of travel, the trends that we're seeing, and the economic implications of those trends, as well as the impact on the Chicago business community. Obviously, we're in the midst of a major expansion and renovation of O'Hare, but transportation, travel, leisure to Chicago is critically important, I'm sure, to many of you and your businesses here in Chicago. And we've got just an outstanding group of speakers with my good friend Mark Hoplamazian, the president and chief executive officer of Hyatt Hotels Corporation, Robert Isom, the chief executive officer of American Airlines, and then today's moderator, Phil LeBeau, who's the auto and airline industry reporter for CNBC, and actually also one of Chicago's very own. I shared with Phil, I certainly always enjoy his segments in the morning on CNBC, always very insightful, and it's wonderful. I share great pride when I see that he's reporting from Chicago. So I think we've got a particularly special program today. So thank you very much.
How's this?
All right.
There you go. My photographer would laugh and say, it's not the first time you've forgotten to do that. Let's begin first off with a conversation about what you guys are seeing with the economy right now. CPI came out this morning. The core inflation hotter than expected, but overall it is cooling just a little bit when you look at the overall number. And you guys see this firsthand in terms of the impact of inflation. Mark, we'll start first with you. What are you seeing in terms of the impact it's having, and whether it's somebody booking a room, corporations, corporate travel, et cetera?
Yeah. First of all, I would just want to add to Scott's welcome. It's especially gratifying to see such a big ballroom filled with people when it's a Hyatt hotel. So thank you. Just saying. And I explained to Phil earlier that I'm kind of like a groupie fan of his, so it's kind of exciting to be on stage. And Robert and I have been so close over the years, so this is just like so exciting for me. Anyway, not as exciting as the topic of inflation, however. So
no,
well, that. So yeah, we're seeing factor costs across the board are higher. It's more severe in certain areas. Right now, I would say the number one issue that's on our minds from a macroeconomic perspective is energy prices in Europe, and whether that is so severe that leads to an economic recession, and if so, when and how deep. Less concerned about recession in the US, because I think the energy costs here are more moderated for some good supply-demand reasons. Wages up across the board, right? The entire market has risen. It's a supply and demand market, so it's not surprising. We still have 1 out of every 7 open job positions in the country right now are in the hospitality and leisure segment. So there are a lot of open jobs, and wages have continued to bump up, especially in resort locations and so forth. Having said all that, rates are up significantly. So as I look across our business and I see the progression in ADR, average daily rates, they are keeping pace with the factor costs that are going
Okay.
up. And therefore, we're seeing both higher revenues, obviously, but higher margins as well. And clearly, the sector that's leading that is leisure. I would say group business is up in rate at more modest levels, and business transient travel is the last to return. And I'm sure we'll get into this. I don't want to dive into that topic, but there are signs of life. Let me just say that.
Sure. Robert?
Hey, Mark. It's good to see you in person.
I know. So wonderful.
Mark and I have held each other up over these times. You couldn't pick worse businesses to be in
Right.
during a pandemic.
Misery loved
Right.
company, but we became very close friends. So
Exactly. So, but we're happy to have everybody here and to talk about getting back to business, and then certainly flying planes and getting into hotel rooms. And look, since January and February, and heading into March, it's been as if we were in a different year, different planet, right? So as we went into March, traffic really exploded. And that's the same type of trend line that we see ourselves on, even with concerns about different variants and what's going on in Europe as well. So there, of course, we're worried about inflationary elements. 20% of Americans' operating expense is fuel. Okay, so price of fuel has doubled in the last
Right.
6 months. So it's a huge expense. But in terms of the economics, as Mark said, it's supply and demand. And there's a ton of demand out there. There are, at least from the airline perspective, there are some constraints on supply. And that's allowing us to cover the cost of fuel right now. And as we look at where relative pricing is, we're still not that far from where we were in 2019. So travel is still, it's a nice, affordable, endeavor for folks right now.
I'm sure you guys hear this, and I hear this from people I'll come across. They'll be like, well, this is ridiculous how much the airfares are now compared to a year ago, to which I always say, look at everything compared to a year ago.
I know, that's not a good comparison.
Or to stay at a hotel. And so you've got this swell of demand that is out there. By the way, anybody who's ever approached me in the last couple of months and said this always says, yeah, but we're going because we got to go.
Right.
We want to get out there. How long does that hold up in terms of that demand that is out there? I mean, obviously everybody has a limit in terms of how much they'll pay, and we're not there yet, but how great is that backlog, if you will, of demand?
So I'll start. The economy since 2019 has grown, 10%, 13%, right? Airline capacity is down 10, 15%. So the economy has continued to grow. The capacity that we have to actually deploy is a lot less. We're not keeping pace with the travel that's pent up and that will continue on in the future. A good rule of thumb, at least for airline travel, is that about 1% of GDP flows into industry revenues. We're not to that relationship yet, and the GDP has grown significantly. So I am not concerned about us outpacing the type of demand that's out there in the near term for sure.
And I would say right now, so to date, leisure has led the recovery in the hotel industry by far and away. We're doing a huge amount of volume with American Airlines through a new business that we bought last year, Apple Leisure Group, which has the largest tour operator in the country called ALG Vacations. We had, I think, 800,000 departed passengers from January to April, and American has a huge percentage of that. So we're big partners in that. But that demand, so Cancun air capacity is up 10, 11%. Punta Cana in Dominican Republic's up 20. And you're keeping, in fact, you're gaining share in Punta Cana right now. So we're seeing just tremendous demand, and the kinds of, as we look into the second quarter, let's say, people are like, okay, the first quarter was like a blow-off period, everyone has to go.
Right.
Second quarter is mapping out to be better than the first quarter. I mean, we're talking about significant bookings, up 30% and more versus 2019 levels in our resort destinations in the second quarter. Rates are up 20-ish%. And now you look out into, say, Memorial Day, up 30% relative to bookings this time into Memorial Day from 2019. 4th of July, up 20%. Labor Day, up 30%. So the booking curve advanced planning is starting to lengthen out on the leisure side because people are now really worried that they're not going to actually find a place to stay. So they're booking those tickets and they're booking hotel rooms earlier and earlier. So you're starting to see the booking curve go out. So I would say for the foreseeable future, we see no evidence that that's going to come off. Group business, that is corporations and associations getting together, likewise is starting to really come back with a vengeance. And that's because human connection is so critical in business. And all of the tech company executives who said, business travel is basically dead. Like, we're never going to travel, we're not going to get past 50% of where we were before. I actually have data in my pocket that we were talking about earlier. I've got data that demonstrates that they're wrong. Their CEOs, especially Bill Gates, famously saying, never again will people be back on the road. Just not correct. And a lot of that has to do with business, with the group meetings that we're seeing. So I see that also is coming back at a pace that leads me to believe that our group business will be fully recovered to pre-pandemic levels by the end of this year.
And Phil, just from an overall business perspective, small and medium-sized businesses throughout the country,
that's true.
They have far exceeded where they were in 2019.
Right.
That's right.
They've taken off. So what we're waiting on, and we're seeing good signs, is these larger advisory firms, financial services, but it's coming back too. Every meeting that I've had on this trip, and we've talked to politicians in town, we've talked to big companies, everybody's getting back into the office, and it's just mirroring what has happened in other parts of the country. So we're catching up here a little bit.
And in terms of that demand, I was in your city, I want to say about 2 weeks ago. Was fortunate enough to be released from reports for the rest of the day, and so I said, well, I'm going to get on an early flight. Gone are the days of saying, well, yeah, I'll just call and get another empty seat. And I mean, I got on a flight, but I mean, those days are gone, which is a good problem. I mean, you're in the business to fill up the planes, and that's what you should be doing. There's a question here. What are you hearing from corporate customers in terms of their return to office plans here in Chicago and elsewhere? I'll start first with you, Mark.
Yeah, it's been slower in certain markets. I would say the tech-heaviest markets in the country, Seattle, San Francisco, are behind. And by the way, our recovery in those cities is lagging. They're the weakest markets that we've got. Chicago is actually somewhat behind too. And we were comparing notes on this. I think Chicago is behind the curve with respect to people back in the office. And so, but a lot of it has to do with the kinds of jobs that people are allowing to be done remotely. We set 3 standards, and we'll talk more about purpose, I'm sure, at some point. But the first one was got to get the work done. So that's the productivity side, but you can do that remotely or together. The second is well-being. We've got to make sure that we're caring for our people and their personal needs, like if they need to be home for a certain day because they're taking care of a parent or child or whatever. But third is community. We feel like getting back and reestablishing those ties in the office are critical. And we've said to our people leaders, you've got to actually achieve all of that. You can't trade one off against the other. And that's the basis on which we've asked people to come back to the office. I don't know if you've got to...
Well, just for us, our business is all about connecting people. We have to be out on the front lines. So we never, took a hiatus from the office. So we have 120,000 team members, 85%, frontline union, members that are out there every day, either turning a wrench or putting bags on planes or flying planes and serving customers. So we've never taken a break whatsoever. And for the people that I engage with, you talk about, are you going to come back in the office? When do you come in the office? Best thing I can do is describe about how we're allocating business right now. So American Airlines, we've had some really tough times the last couple of years, lost $20 billion over the course of 2 years, right? $20 billion. We had to be in a position right now where American is incredibly strong and has the financial resources. We had to do some really creative things. We financed our Advantage loyalty program for $10 billion, right? The people the companies that got that business are the ones that were actually out there, coming and seeing us. And that's the thing that I tell everybody else that has been holed up. You know what? In the rest of the country, outside of some of the big corporate centers, if you're not out there, really pushing for business right now, somebody else is. And so I don't know if it's a wake-up call, but for us,
But do you hear the same thing from corporate customers or other executives you talk with, that there seems to be, and I hear this, and we alluded to this in our conversation up front, there seems to be sort of that northern plateau of or tier of the country where the mask mandates were in place longer. And this is not a political discussion, but you know, the rules were in place longer than in the Sun Belt. Is that where you see a bit of a lag, if you will, in terms of the return to work, the full activity that you're seeing in other parts of the country?
For sure, it's been true in Chicago. After the mask mandate went away, in our office, we saw a lot of people coming back. A lot of people coming back. Just the idea of it being freed up.
Right.
Yeah, so it definitely had an impact.
And what we can see, because we've been subject to so many regulations and restrictions, you know, everything that we do is basically, you know, approved or not by, you know, the CDC and Health and Human Services. But whether it was testing, whether it was, you know, masking, you name it, we were able to see real time. As soon as a restriction is pulled down, bookings change the next day. And so the one thing that we're waiting on right now is we as a country have to address this testing requirement that we have, and we're the only ones that are doing it now. They're requiring testing coming back into the United States, and that is a key. We talk about international travel, and it's big from a leisure perspective, but it's really big from a business perspective.
No question about it.
And to that end, you know, if we can and when we do, and I think it should be fairly soon, we get that pulled, you're going to see more people coming to Chicago.
Yeah.
I would agree. How do you guys feel about employment in terms of the ability to recruit the talent that you need, given the fact that we're just not seeing in this country the level of return to, whether it's people who have said, that's it, I'm done, I'm retiring, or people have said, I'm just not sure what I'm going to do. It just hasn't been there yet. How do you feel about the ability to recruit the talent you're looking for?
So I can only speak for the airline industry. The real shortfall that we have right now is that for 2 years we didn't train many pilots or any pilots, and then we had a real push of early retirements. So we have to get more people in the industry. It takes a long time to train a pilot. It takes a couple of years to get somebody that can come on and actually function. So American Airlines today has about 100, 150 aircraft that are actually grounded. You know, we're not flying because we don't have the pilots. It'll take a few years for that to work out because economics are really solid for that. You come in, start at $80,000, you can make $400,000 a year over time.
But separate from that, let's talk about the other positions that don't require the special training that a pilot does.
Tech.
Yeah.
Tech is where we have a shortfall. Attrition levels increase, but by and large, you know, right now there seems to be more normalcy. Things seem to be leveling out. We're able to hire to size the airline and to run the airline and to manage it. So I feel fairly comfortable where we are.
How do you feel?
Technology and digital positions in the corporate office are probably the toughest jobs, and we have been struggling with that now for
Is it because the talent has the opportunities to go somewhere else? Is it because the talent that you thought you would get in the past are not as interested? How would you attribute it to?
I think it's a couple of things, actually. I think a lot of companies over the course of the pandemic, by the way, us and a lot of our competitors, they turn to more digital tools in a contactless avenue.
Right.
So that means you need more engineers, you need more code writers, you need more testing people to run tests, A/B tests and otherwise. So, and data analytics folks. So I think everyone actually added to those teams during the pandemic to actually build out all these tools. That's one. And two, the competitiveness from core platform technology companies, Amazon, Salesforce, and those companies has grown because they're growing at a faster rate than the economy.
Have a question here. How has the pandemic changed how you define your customer? Do you still look at them as business versus leisure? And I guess what they're really asking here is, when I would talk with you, Robert, or with others in the airline industry, I'd say, well, how's corporate travel? How's the leisure travel?
Yeah.
Do you see a hybrid filtering into this now?
No question about it. In fact, we were looking at the data recently, and we had an earnings call yesterday, and I mentioned on the call that we're seeing increases in occupancy on Thursday nights and Sunday nights. Two historically, Thursday nights were reasonably strong historically, but we're seeing pronounced increases there, and Sunday nights. And our assessment is that people are starting a trip, business trip, a little earlier, doing the work that they need to do on the Friday, staying the weekend, and extending it into Monday. So it's a blending of a long weekend with a business trip. And we believe that will persist and grow. So yes, there's blurriness. We also, at the beginning of the pandemic, actually, after listening to Bill Gates, I turned to our team and I said, we need to sub-segment our customer base so that we understand this. So when we did that, we also realized that the antiquated form of defining leisure versus business in the hotel industry was if you checked in on a Friday night or a Saturday night, you were a leisure guest. Everyone else is a business customer. Right. I mean, you want to talk about the most dumbed down thing you could possibly imagine. And so we went to work and said, no, we have so much other data that helps us understand why people are traveling, and we then applied a new lens. And that new lens has been in place now for several years, so we have very good visibility into why people are traveling, but there is more blending going on.
Yeah.
You see the same thing?
Bleisure is real.
Right? Yeah.
I hate that word, but yes, it's true.
No,
well, look, I have a friend who lives in the Charlotte area and is in New York for work, and they moved there during the pandemic, but they have to go back to the office. They're on their American flight, whether it's, every other week or every third week, but they have become a regular customer where in the past they were not going to be there. And I'm sure you're seeing a lot of that.
And leisure customers have changed too. So, we're seeing many, many more people, just basically buy up. And whether that's, premium economy or business class, they're doing it. And they want the amenities that they used to have when they were traveling for business, even though their trips look like what we used to define as leisure. So it's from a yield and pricing perspective, the dynamics are working well.
I agree with that comment too, because our luxury, we've shifted our portfolio. So right now, 42% of our total hotel inventory is leisure, luxury. Luxury itself is 30%. That's the strongest rate realization that we're seeing, rate increases that we're seeing, because the demand is so much higher. People are going on holiday, but they want a great experience at a higher rated hotel, at a nicer hotel.
Have a hometown question here. We'll start first with you, Mark. Where does Chicago fit into the global operations you have at American and Hyatt? Obviously, your headquarters are here, but give some perspective in terms of the importance of Chicago.
Yeah, we have a very large presence in Chicago. I'm sure that there's some historical reasons for that. But our presence in Chicago, so Hyatt is the smallest of the major branded companies by property count. But I think our market share in Chicago is second out of all the major brands. We have a super large presence. We opened the first at convention headquarters hotel at McCormick Place, I forget when, many years ago. That's been now expanded to 1,200 rooms. The largest hotel in our entire system is this hotel, 2,100 rooms. Wow. There is no bigger hotel that we have in the world. And we've got a large number of hotels, not just in the city of Chicago, but around Chicago. We employ, pre-pandemic, about 4,000 people at the hotel level and another 1,000 people in corporate offices.
And it's not dying down. I guess maybe what they're getting at here is that business remains strong, and your presence and what you're seeing here in Chicago is not changing, so to speak. Changing in the sense that it's not diminishing.
Well, let me put it this way. We're not changing our focus on Chicago, but Chicago's lagging.
Okay.
Chicago's lagging in recovery. We have seen other cities come back more strongly. I think part of that has to do with international travel not really being opened up again fully. But I think this city has been so dependent on the large conventions that have come through town, and that is not yet back in full motion. It's critical. That has to be a major area of focus. The newly appointed CEO of Choose Chicago is here. So Lynn, you got your work cut out for you. There she is. And so yeah, we've got to get focused on that and make sure that comes back.
He mentioned international travel. We'd have a lot more flights coming into O'Hare if things were different in a number of areas internationally.
Yeah, no kidding. I've got a number of things to talk about on that. On that front, but hey, just our business generally down from capacity perspective 10%. Chicago down 30%, right? So, and that fits in overall. But we're going to work our way through this. Over the long run, American has so much investment in Chicago, namely out at O'Hare. So the rates and charges and taxes that everybody hears about, American ultimately pays all those. So we have, with United, probably a $8-9 billion investment project going on in O'Hare. It's financed over a long time, but it's going to greatly add to expense. We have to have a supply of passengers, to actually make work that cost out over. So for us, the investment hasn't stopped. New gates, tremendous amount of investment. As the city comes back, we're going to be there. In the meantime, though, we move planes to where passengers are. That said, this summer, I do have a little bone to pick with a company that has moved their headquarters out of Chicago to remain nameless. I have planes that need to be delivered and that are owed to us that would be flying in Chicago in the marketplace today this summer if they could deliver them to me. So they've got to get to their business. They're still a great partner. The aircraft are fantastic, but I'm short some supply, and they would fly additional international destinations. Instead of we'll have 9 international destinations, I think we'd have another couple.
I have to quickly ask you about international in terms of, we know what's going on with Europe.
Right.
When you look at Asia, and I know China is a completely different animal on its own, how do you feel about, let's say, over the next 6 months in terms of the ability to start adding back some service over there, whether it's from Chicago or other cities here in the U.S.? Is it just a patchwork of some places are improving, some places are still not in terms of opening up?
Yeah, it's Asia's not Asia. Southeast Asia is doing better.
Yep.
Australia is getting back on its feet. Japan's got a ways to go, but is showing some signs. Korea, Korea. I do think that there is some opportunity there. And China is, who knows? We're certain. Our schedules are built. You're looking at 6-9 months just for pilots and planes and things like that. We have to actually put markers in the ground now, and we're not putting anything into additional capacity in China.
It's unpredictable just by virtue of the zero COVID policies that they've got going. Our business has been down over 50% since the major lockdown in Shanghai hit in China. But over the last 2 months, March and April, we've seen non-Greater China, Asia, so Southeast Asia, Japan, Korea, there's lots of activity in Korea. We're seeing some really significant increases now, up 10, up 15% per month. So we're starting to see people get back on the road. A lot of it's leisure focused, but it's intra-Asia. We're not seeing a lot of inbound Americans and outbound to America. So right now, and it's got to start somewhere. So they're flying across Asia, Singapore, Vietnam, Thailand, et cetera.
You guys have been doing your jobs, your industries, for years. So you've seen good times, bad times. You've seen more than a few recessions, I'm sure. And so it brings up the question, what we're in right now, whether or not we do ultimately slide into a recession or not, how does this time compare to previous times? Does it give you a roadmap saying, okay, we've been through this kind of situation before, I think we know what to do? Or is it so unusual and unique because of the pandemic, because of the inflation that we're seeing right now? How do you approach it?
Well, I'm new in my job. I've only been in it a month.
Well, at your job, but you've been in the industry. You've been around the block a time or two.
I've only been in it a month, and we're looking forward to a profitable second quarter. So that's a good sign again for the business we've been in. But Phil, for me it's one of demand is going to return, and if you don't run your business with the mindset of growth and prosperity, okay, look, I don't know how you go about it. And so for us at American Airlines, we were the largest airline throughout the pandemic. We flew 1 out of every 3 passengers. We've had more planes, more flights, and the kind of connections we made were for people that were doing real stuff, not visiting grandma or grandpa. It was, bone marrow couriers and power plant mechanics and stuff like that.
Frontline healthcare workers.
And frontline healthcare workers. So I know demand is going to return. American has to be there. We've made a commitment to the country based on the benefits that we've received as part of the payroll support program for our team members. We're going to be there to take to the country, make sure that we're ready to get people into hotels and fill city blocks. And so my view hasn't changed. That business, that function, it's part of who we are, and we've got to be out there to serve, and we will.
So I would say I agree with all of that because travel is a fundamental human, satisfies a fundamental human desire to discover, to explore, and to be together, that sense of community. So like Robert, I have nothing but optimism about travel in general. Having said that, about the way you asked the question is interesting. Neither of us, and we talked a lot, very frequently when the pandemic, before the pandemic, but when the pandemic hit, we were on the phone all the time comparing notes about just understanding what this virus was all about, what we knew about it, what we didn't. A couple of things that I would say though. First, the reason why we became such close friends and fast friends is because the first exposure that we had to one another after we did our partnership at the loyalty level was around purpose. And our purpose as a company is to care for people so they can be their best. American's purpose is to care for people on life's journey. Pay attention to the fact we didn't say serve in either case, we said care for. There's a huge difference between caring for someone and serving them. So what I would say is we lived through the most severe, nothing like this ever has happened in our industry, in the entire history of the industry. The same is true for airlines. His revenues went down by close to 100%. Ours were down 95. So when your business evaporates overnight, you have to completely change your mindset and open it up to how you do things completely afresh. So I think that we built tremendous muscle in adaptation and agility and figuring stuff out. So I think that actually will serve us well going forward. And there is not a rigid playbook, there's an agile playbook, right? We've learned how to be agile in a way that you can't possibly imagine.
You've learned to adapt.
You've learned to adapt at speed and in a hyper cross-functional way, and you've had to go quickly. And you just got to get into market and keep testing and learning and testing and learning. You can't wait to make decisions, you got to go. But I think the thing that connected us so tightly is that every conversation either started with, was about, or ended with a discussion about people. And right now, I think the epidemic that has followed the pandemic has to do with holistic mental health and mental well-being. And we see it a lot in our company, and we've done a lot to try to understand it more. So I would say to you, we have built all those muscles, and we have a much more elevated sensitivity to practicing empathy, making sure that we really understand what's going on with people, and making sure that we can continue to care for them. I think with that as the undergirding for who we are, and I can say this, I can speak on behalf of Robert because we've talked so much about it, our organizations culturally are aligned that way, which is why our partnership is so strong. But with that in place, this is going to sound a little cliche, but like the resiliency level has gone up so much that I have confidence that if the next version of a massive disruption, God willing, it's not something that looks like a war, but even if it were another pandemic, I feel much more confidence today than I did when this thing first happened. Because when this thing first happened, I mean, my head was spinning every day, trying to figure out where the money was going to come from, how much we were going to be losing, how do you keep people employed, et cetera, et cetera. So I think we've come through this with tremendously higher resilience.
We've got a few minutes left. If you have any questions, now's the time to text them. I'm going to take a couple here. One of these has to do with the raffle of points and miles. What do you see as the future of loyalty programs, Robert?
Oh, yeah, the Advantage Loyalty Program is the largest loyalty program literally in the world. And for us, it's something that creates not just a connection, but for us, it's also a way that you can fly a plane, and then you can also keep in touch with our brand in other fashions. So the Citibank Advantage card or the Barclays card. those kind of things become very important revenue streams, because what they are saying is, hey, people want to actually invest in a relationship for goods and services that aren't going to be delivered for potentially years. And so it's been a way in which we can keep in great communication and contact, and it's something that I think is going to be a driver in our business, long into the future. Fortunately, people want to travel.
Yeah.
That's why
that's why it's important.
We look at our Advantage card. It's one of the highest producers of all MasterCard cards. So I'm very, very confident this is going to be something that people are going to be able to use and enjoy long into the future.
And I think that one of the things that we and working together with partners like American, we have focused on providing a platform that enables our members to experience more things. So it's not just about the points program and the transactional side of it. It is really about opening their opportunity set up to do more things that are in the well-being space. So for example, we have a unique partnership with Headspace, and we've provided Headspace for all of our members and all of our colleagues at the same time. But many other very active types of engagements and experiences. And I think we've done some things together with American to create unique programs. And I think that is, you want to talk about stimulating someone's creative genius and sort of saying, oh my God, I've got to go do that. And I have the perfect vehicle. I've got status. I'm a concierge key member, or I'm a globalist in Hyatt's program, and I'm going to go. So it's important, and we look at loyalty as a two-way street here, which is why we're spending so much time on experiences as well.
Another question. CEOs need to think big picture and long term. An important part of that is sustainability. What are you doing to ensure you're operating a sustainable business? Mark?
Well, we set sustainability goals back in 2007, which was my first full year as CEO. And we met those goals with respect to carbon footprint and water utilization and waste stream. We've just recently set science-based targets for 2030. It's about a 28% in that range, 27.5, I think is the precise number, reduction in greenhouse gas. So reduction in carbon footprint. And also still working on the waste stream. So we brought a much more rigor into our process right now. At least one of our competitors announced that they were going to a zero carbon footprint, which I find curious because our business, we don't own all of our hotels. In fact, we own very few of them. That competitor owns none of theirs. So I was trying to figure out how they were.
How do you get to zero?
How do you do that without knowing what the partner relationship is? And in fact, a lot of companies who've made these bold predictions about getting to zero or net neutrality carbon neutrality they're relying on technologies that don't exist today. They're thinking, we'll figure it out in the future. And the airline business has a really bigger hill to climb because, last time I checked, you can't fly an electric plane. At least not.
Sure.
Hey, shh.
Well, Robert, sustainability, we've talked a lot about
It's hard.
SAF and sustainable
really hard.
airline
That's-
aviation fuel.
I'm just empathizing.
No, I know it. No, look, but we consume a lot of fossil fuels.
Yeah.
That's our industry. So it's front and center.
Yeah.
And it's real life. So the best things you can do is an airline is burn less fuel for what you're flying. And the best way to do that is number one, fly the shortest distance. So we've got to work with the government in terms of air traffic control.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
This antiquated fashion of going from kind of dot to dot to dot as opposed to straight lines is something that.
By the way, everybody knows it needs to change within the industry.
Right, I know.
It's critical.
It's
only
but it never
60 years
changes.
old.
But it's only 6 years old, but it's 60 years of really reliable and safe
Right.
operations.
Yeah.
So and the investment is going to be something that is done over decades, and so we've got to have a government that allows us to do that. So number one is fly the shortest distances. Number two is burn the least amount of fuel every time you fly. Best way you can do that is have new engines, actually new planes.
Yep.
So Americans invested $25 billion over the last 6 years in new planes. That's the next best way. And then over the long run, for us to kind of get to the 2050 goals that we have of net zero emissions, is to have a sustainable aviation fuel, which is basically a biofuel. That is being produced today. We can put that in our aircraft, but it's produced in such limited quantities,
Right.
and it's at such high price that this is something like solar, like wind, like,
It'll need a government program in order to
have
subsidize the
government
pricing
program.
of it.
So there's a vision to get there, but a lot has to be done.
5 minutes left, and I was told let's end with the following question. Where are you guys going for your next vacation?
Let me think about that for a second.
I'll be staying in a Hyatt.
There's the right answer.
Yeah.
I'm taking a few days off at the end of this month to go fishing in Idaho.
Oh, that's nice.
Yep. So that'll be my next getaway.
I
And
think,
I will be on an American flight for sure.
of course. I think my wife and I are going to try to go to Wimbledon this summer.
Oh, nice.
So I haven't been, but it'll
been
be
either.
It's a
exciting.
treat.
Huh?
You'll love it.
So that's the next location.
How about you, Phil?
Colorado.
Great. What are you doing there?
What am I going to do?
You're hiking?
A little hike,
Yeah.
restaurants with my wife.
All right. Cool.
All the fun stuff, all the things you do in Colorado.
Yeah.
So it'll be
Wonderful.
fun.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank
both
you.
of
Hey,
This-
but for everybody here though, before you get up, hey, the time to buy both hotels and airline tickets is now.
Yes.
okay?
Oh yeah. Don't wait.
It's not going to
Don't
get
wait.
cheaper this summer.
Right.
Well,
right?
one last thing, in case you haven't seen, that is knowing your audience with those socks. City of Chicago socks, I love it.